Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I'm Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. This will be a video for the hometown crowd. We are going through all of the pre-filed legislation that we're seeing drop, new and creative and unconstitutional ways that they will try to disarm us again in 2025. This is going to be a follow-up to a bill that apparently the legislature wasn't real happy with because it didn't kill all the gun stores in the state, so they needed to add on to it. So this is basically the Kill the Gun Stores in Washington State Bill 2.0. It is very nefarious. It is going to be very costly. And of course, it has a high probability of passing because, after all, this is the People's Republic of Washington. So today, let's spend a few minutes and let's talk about the new way Washington State wants to close all of its gun stores. Okay, Washington State, what we're going to be talking about today is Senate Bill 5099, sponsored by Senators Lovick and Peterson, two people who absolutely, positively hate your inalienable rights. Now, some of you might recall a bill from last year, House Bill 2118, which we entitled the Kill the FFL bill. Well, that got a little too watered down for the Democrats' liking, and even though that bill has not gone into effect, I want you to understand that. This bill, 2118 from last year's legislative session, doesn't even go into effect until July of 2025. But apparently the data must be such that, whoa, my God, these gun stores are just contributing to Washington's horrific gun violence problem, which we all know is not the case here. And so along comes Senate Bill 5099, which is just basically 2118 version 2.0, but it adds a lot of different things. I'm going to go through it fast and furious. I will let the FFLs out there know that we are likely going to do a private live chat with all of you. We'll go through this bill in greater detail, but we're going to have to secure that chat so that we don't have, our friends from the Attorney General's office dropping in on it. Now, what does this bill do? This bill does a lot of things, and like I say, I'm going to go through it really fast and furious just so that you, whether you're an FFL or you just depend on your FFLs, which is all of your lawful and responsible gun-owning Washington residents, you can understand what this bill would do if it becomes law. First things it does is it redefines dealer, okay, because only dealers are going to be subject to this law, and it does make an exemption for certain people who might be home-based FFLs that don't put a lot of volume. The new definition of dealer, if enacted into law, would read as follows. Dealer means a person who or business that has engaged in the wholesale or retail sale of firearms, frames, or receivers, or who has or is required to have a federal firearms license under 18 U.S.C. Section 923A. For purposes of this section, a dealer does not include persons who or businesses that have sold 10 or fewer firearms, frames, or receivers, either finished or unfinished, in a 12-month period. So you can see there is an exception, but it is for incredibly low volume, virtually non-existent businesses. Now, here's the big thing. Because all the gun stores already right now have to have federal licensing, but that's just not tapping enough money out of them. This bill, if enacted into law, would create a new state licensing regime that all gun stores in the state would have to comply with. So they would have to go through both state licensing requirements as well as federal licensing requirements. And it's the state licensing requirements that the state can then use to put the squeeze and start adding all sorts of costs to the operation of a gun store. Washington State Patrol shall grant licenses completed in accordance with B of this subsection unless the applicant does not meet the eligibility requirements described in subsection 3 of this section, or the applicant has made a false statement on the application. Now, I want you to understand, when you go to apply for your Washington State Patrol firearms license, you're going to have to provide a lot of information. Now, a lot of the information is stuff that you would expect to have to provide, but there is some additional information that does raise some questions. For example, a copy of the lease or deed for the intended business site. Section 6, a copy of the insurance required under subsection 14A of this section. And there again is another place where they're going to just put the screws to these FFLs by creating insurance mandates that no one can comply with. But here's the thing. You see, once you are licensed by the Washington State Patrol, in addition to ATF being able to show up and inspect, well, guess what? So does the Washington State Patrol, because the statute would provide Washington State Patrol shall conduct an on-site inspection of 10% of state license holders' places of business annually to ensure dealers are complying with the requirements to hold a state license. But if you think, well, 90% of us won't get searched, well, guess what? In addition to the inspection required under sub C of this subsection, Washington State Patrol may conduct reasonable, periodic, unannounced inspections of state license holders' places of business during the dealer's regular posted business hours to ensure that the state license holder is complying with the license requirements. And then, once the State Patrol has its act together annually, all the data they collect, not only from the applications, but as well as from all of their inspections, that then needs to be shared with the governor, the attorney general, and the state legislature. Oh, and for gun stores that may have out-of-state investors, understand that new language is being added to the requirement to hold the state license, which will include, provided that at least one person listed on the dealer's federal firearm license as a responsible person has a valid permanent Washington driver's license, Washington state identification card, or has been a resident of this state for the previous consecutive 90 days. And if you've lost a federal firearms license in the last 5 years, you will be ineligible under Washington State's criteria to apply for a Washington State firearms permit. Oh, and by the way, where the old law required some type of licensing in order to handle firearms, the new law is going to require licensing to handle firearms or ammunition, again beginning to tip off some other changes that we might have coming our way here in Washington State. If a dealer suspects that an employee has stolen a firearm, they must report it to law enforcement within 48 hours. I really honestly don't know what that requirement is. Therefore, I think any reputable employer would report someone immediately if they believe that they were stealing firearms from their inventory. Okay, there's more. You guys might recall House Bill 2118 basically required FFLs to go out and retrofit their buildings. Now, even though that law has not gone into effect, therefore the FFLs had not theoretically had to retrofit the buildings yet. Therefore, we don't have any data to see, hey, does this law actually effectively solve the problem, whatever that may be? Well, now, the state legislature, they're not waiting for that because they're going to add additional restrictions to the premises of gun stores above and beyond what was already passed on 2118. And some of these changes include metal bars or grates on the windows, metal security screens, and this is really important. You remember how you have to now videotape everybody and technically audio record everyone that comes into your store? Well, they're going to require the type of lighting that needs to be used so that they can make sure they can see everything. Don't believe me. The bill actually will require, with interior lighting that is sufficient to identify characteristics of a person on surveillance video or cameras capable of clear capture in low light conditions. Oh, and then, of course, the Washington State Patrol is entitled to come in whenever they want to inspect your security and surveillance equipment to make sure that you're complying with those requirements as well. Oh, and then, of course, they're going to require all new types of insurance, which probably will not be available at all whatsoever. And if it is available, it's going to be cost prohibitive. But here's the other thing, and this kind of tips their cards at what they're trying to do with state preemption. Because even though the state's going to require some astronomical amount of insurance, well, local governments might be able to add more to it. Don't believe me? The bill specifically states, this section does not preclude any local authority from requiring a more stringent requirement regarding the maintenance of liability insurance. Well, the only way that could be done is if the state of Washington did away with state preemption, which is exactly on the agenda for 2025. Now, of course, you can lose your Washington State Patrol firearms license for a lot of the reasons that you would expect. You know, getting involved in criminal activity, getting convicted of a felony, losing your federal firearms license, engaging in illegal trafficking of firearms. I have zero problems with any of that. But if you don't comply with everything that Washington State Patrol wants you to do, including when you are inspected, well, that's grounds for revocation as well, because the bill specifically states, Washington State Patrol may revoke a state license if the state license holder, 1, unreasonably refuses to allow Washington State Patrol to conduct an on-site inspection pursuant to subsection 2C and D of this, or 2, unreasonably refuses to permit Washington State Patrol to inspect a record as required by subsection 10A of this section. Now, cost. Here's how it's going to work. It's going to cost every gun store to get their foot in the door with their first license $500 in licensing fees. But after that, The renewal fee is going to be based upon the volume of firearms that you are selling. And obviously, the more you sell, the more you're going to pay for your renewal fee. The bill specifically reads, the license renewal fees shall depend on the number of sales based upon an average of the prior 3 years, or if the dealer has not been in business for 3 years, based upon the average over the time the dealer has been in business as follows. A, 1 to 50 firearms per year, $125. B, 50 to 250 firearms per year, $250. C, 251 to 750 firearms per year, $500. D, 751 to 1,000 firearms per year, $1,000. And E, over 1,000 firearms per year, $1,500. And if you think that's crazy, don't worry, because the Washington State Patrol is being given carte blanche to raise these fees to whatever they think might be necessary, because the bill specifically states, Washington State Patrol shall annually review the initial license fees and license renewal fee and may adjust those fees based on the cost for administering this section. Washington State Patrol shall not adjust fees more than once each year and shall not adjust fees by more than 20% each year. But that means over the course of 5 years, you could double all of those fees. Oh, and then finally, as if that was not enough, every single employee of a gun store in Washington State, in order to get licensed, in order to maintain licensing, is going to have to undergo additional mandatory training. Training which is going to have an expense to it, training which has a deadline to get done, and training which nobody has any curriculum for it whatsoever, and there's a high probability that the training will not be available at the time that the statute is enacted. Washington State Patrol shall develop training or approve training courses provided by other entities for state license holders and their employees. The training must be available in an online format and include an examination with at least 20 questions derived from the course material and intended to confirm that a course participant understands the information covered in the course. So, sorry, I said there was new training. Yeah, there is new training. There's new training plus an exam to come with it. The training must include instruction regarding the following. 1, state and federal laws governing the sale and transfer of firearms and ammunition. 2, recognizing and identifying straw purchases, trafficking, and fraudulent activity. 3, indicators that a person is attempting to purchase a firearm illegally. 4, recognizing and identifying indicators that an individual intends to use a firearm for unlawful purposes. 5, recognizing and identifying indicators that an individual intends to use a firearm for self-harm. 6, preventing theft or burglary of firearms and ammunition. 7, responding to circumstances described in A1 through A6 of this subsection and any applicable reporting requirements. 8, effectively teaching consumers rules of firearm safety, including the safe handling and storage of firearms. And 9, any other reasonable business practices Washington State Patrol determines will deter firearm trafficking or the unlawful use of firearms. But here's the deal, and this is where the problem's going to happen, okay? The minute the law goes into effect, every dealer in the state of Washington has 30 days to file proof of compliance with this training program. Here's my prediction. Law is going to go into effect, but there is not going to be any training program developed, and it won't be developed for some considerable time following the enactment of the law. Okay, it is Senate Bill 5099. It is an absolute pile of crap. It is absolutely positively designed to drive what gun stores they weren't able to drive out of business in the state to now actually complete that task. We're going to link it up down below so that you can geek out on it for yourself. To all the FFLs out there, we will probably put together a little bit of a live chat sometime right after the first of the year where we can have a private conversation, not only about this, but also about the impending enactment date on House Bill 2118. Listen, if you got any more questions about this or anything else related to what's left of our Second Amendment rights, which in Washington State right now is next to nothing, you should know how to get a hold of Washington gun law by now, but if you don't, that's okay. That information is down there in the description box. If you got an idea for a video we should be doing around here, tell us all about it by clicking on that link right there and letting us know. If you want to subscribe to our monthly newsletter, the ability to do all of that is right down there in the description box. And then finally, and most importantly, let's everyone remember that part of being the lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about all the time here, is to know what the law is in every situation, how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching and stay safe.